Citadel Steep Landing. The Citadel was built very late in development, and initially we had no clear vision for its gameplay. This isn't uncommon. While game design usually drives our process, big creative choices we make early on, such as the existence of the Combined Citadel, need specific design work done to fit into the final product. After the previous chapter's climactic battle, we thought a different tone for the finale here in the Citadel would feel more rewarding. Even if we wanted to raise the stakes, creating new mechanics and NPCs was too risky this late. Our first plan was to make it a passive narrative spectacle, a train ride through the heart of the Combine war machine, ending in Breen's office. But after we developed that plan, we spent a few days prototyping super gravity gun mechanics, thinking that at the game's end, we could fulfill players' wishes by making them all-powerful, without disrupting the game design's overall balance. The results were immediately promising, leading to a quick redesign to incorporate the super gravity gun. Rather than traditional end-game challenges, we wanted the player to feel godlike, grabbing enemies at will, ripping consoles off walls. In the end, the Citadel blends these two concepts, alternating between spectacle and unleashed power.
Citadel entrance. We built the route into the Citadel backwards. The interior geometry was created as an art prototype to perfect the look. We knew you were coming from the sewer pipe in our Street War map and had to create a section of slides and jumps into the Citadel entrance to connect them.
Lightmap Pass. The Citadel interior is relatively simple geometrically, but the combined metal material and the dramatic lighting help sell the immensity of the structure. Lightmap resolution was increased on important, interesting surfaces and reduced on ones that were fully shadowed or distant. Also, due to the large size of the Citadel spaces, unnecessarily large lightmap surfaces had a significant performance cost. Near the end of the development, there was a large pass done throughout the Citadel levels to optimize these values for visual interest and performance. This was made easier by a new feature added to the Hammer level editor that would display surfaces with their Luxel density.
Security alert. Unregistered weapons detected. Confiscation field engaged. Warning. Countervector singularity device detected. Confiscation field security alert. Illegal countervector singularity device detected. Deploy. Diagnose. Detect.
Weapon strip. Once we introduced the supergravity gun, we really didn't want players returning to their conventional weapons, so we did the only rational thing. We disintegrated them. It helps to have an inscrutable supernatural enemy like the Combine as the antagonist of your game, because it stands to reason that they could simply just have a disintegrator. Why not? And if, for some reason, we had needed you to have your loadout back in the middle of the level, wouldn't you know it, they also have a reintegrator.
So, this is Dr. Freeman. At last. I wish I could say this was a pleasant surprise, but it's neither a surprise nor, as you will surely agree, very pleasant. Well, I am nothing if not pragmatic.
Supergravity Origins. By this point in development, we were confident in the design of the gravity gun. We wanted to give the player a taste of feeling omnipotent, and set to work on making a supercharged version. It didn't take long, truly maybe a day of prototyping, before we had something that we liked and it became the core of the gameplay of the Citadel. With our physics engine complete, we were free to find new and exciting ways to push it past its previous limits and yield whatever fun results came of it. Our prototype object, an ultra-heavy watermelon that weighed hundreds of pounds in our physics sim, ultimately became the Combine balls you experience in the game.
Well, Dr. Freeman, under other circumstances, I like to think we might have been able to work together in an atmosphere of mutual trust and respect. Certainly, judging from your brief tenure at Black Mesa while I was its administrator, you showed every promise of becoming a valuable and productive contributor to the scientific process. And yet, I'm not sure what spurred you to it. But there is really no place in this enterprise for a rogue physicist.
Dissolved weapons. All the Combine's weapons were set to dissolve after the Combine soldier was ragdolled with a gravity gun for 2 reasons. 1, so players wouldn't pick them up and use them, but also to improve the performance in these maps. Additionally, a ragdoll manager was added that would remove the fallen soldier ragdoll corpses as the player progresses forward.
Combine Ball and Balls training. In playtests, players were not noticing that the Combine spheres dissolved the soldiers and why they were disappearing. We initially tried to solve this by making the spheres prefer to bounce towards enemies to increase the likelihood of dissolving kills. We eventually realized that the reason players didn't notice the effect was because it always happened during intense combat, and people have a very limited ability to learn new things when under stress. As a late-effort remedy, we inserted a low-pressure training room with a force field that can only be opened by grabbing the Combine Ball. This setup was added specifically to train how Combine Balls work to deactivate force fields, and that punting it at the soldier would dissolve them. Even then, in the playtests, it was only moderately successful. Despite our efforts, some of the players still struggled to perceive the dissolving effects of the projectiles. We ran out of time and decided that since players were still telling us they were feeling powerful, it was okay if not all of them perceived why they were succeeding.
What started life as a watermelon in prototype form ended up turning into an energy ball after the sounds made for its impact and explosion sounded less like produce and more like what we have here in the game. Once we started iterating on levels that weren't watermelon-based, we realized we could use the energy ball not just as a fun way to kill soldiers, but also as a puzzle element for powering up and down various equipment. At a significantly later point in development, we were not liking the AR-2 altfire we had at the time, and since the team liked the Combine Ball, we ended up incorporating it right into the AR-2 altfire. We always look back and are surprised at how the things we were working on independently of one another in the game come together late to solve problems.
Your mentors are partly to blame, of course. My disappointment in Eli Vance and Isaac Kleiner is far greater than my sorrow over your unfortunate choice of career path. In a way, I suppose you could not have done otherwise. Who knows what seeds of iconoclasm they planted when you were young and gullible. But while they certainly share a great part of the responsibility for the recent troubles, it is you alone who have chosen to act in such willful for humanity's future.
Green monologue. Creative work is never done in a vacuum, as we're all inspired by other things. Green's monologue that appears on the Citadel monitors here got some inspiration from an earlier game we all love, Thief 2, in which the antagonist taunts the player while they're sneaking around. The execution is quite different, but the core inspiration is there. The real heavy lifting, however, what really sells this moment, comes from the performance by the late Robert Culp. His delivery was pitch perfect. He interpreted each of Breen's lines with a subtlety and flair that transformed the character on the page into something truly special. A voice session with Robert Culp was as easy as they come. He'd have the script, the engineer would hit record, and that was about it. The lesson reinforced here is to work with people whose talent exceeds yours, people you're certain to learn from. Don't go in with a fixed idea of how the line should be delivered or how a certain moment should play out, but instead collaborate with talented people and go into it trusting that they'll make it even better.
Elevator fight. Even though we wanted the player to feel all-powerful, we couldn't resist the temptation of adding a tough fight at the elevator shaft. The battle waiting for the arrival of the elevator here ended up being somewhat more difficult than originally envisioned for this part of the game. It became easier during playtesting, but there really wasn't enough playtesting time to balance it to the level it should have been. Though the player was never in that much danger, it is the number of soldiers that appear that makes it feel like more of a climactic battle than it is.
Freeman, if you can. You have destroyed so much. What is it exactly that you have created? Can you name even one thing? I thought not.
Replacing the prefabs. The Combine energy balls are a relatively simple setup, with a force field holding the perpetually bouncing objects. However, during playtesting, there were repeated bugs with the energy balls bouncing around, going rogue, and escaping the force field we set up to contain them. Due to the limits of our prefab tech at the time, this required them to be manually rebuilt multiple times at every one of their locations in all of the Citadel levels that included them.
For humanity's survival. And not as we have narrowly defined ourselves, but as something greater than we could ever imagine. Something we can now only begin to glimpse.
Strider fight. One of the original Citadel prototypes included being able to grab the Strider with a super gravity gun, and for a long time the fight with the Strider was about getting close enough to grab him with the gun. Toward the end of development, we decided that grabbing the Strider made him feel too weak, especially after all the combat against them during Street War, so we replaced the encounter with one where you kill him with Combine balls. Model pieces were added so the Strider could be jibbed and blown apart instead of dragging its body around. This is the only time in the game when a Strider has this effect.
Look at what you are throwing away. Is it worth it?
Getting in the pod. The pod ascension sequence that starts here necessitated taking full control of the scene and the player view. This is contrary to our usual desire to have the player retain as much control as possible. For this final step, we felt the trade-off was worth it. The player is so powerful at this point that controlling them was difficult, so we had to disable them. We do still have all the characters in the scene talking to the player, keeping them the center of attention. We also were able to provide some narration through the environment along the way. The train ride through the Citadel starting here contains several adversaries that we had art content for but were cut from the main part of the game. From the safety of your cozy pod, you can see the processing of stalkers and a quick glimpse of the crab synth.